Hello and welcome to Failure Analysis. This is Clubhouse chat number 2. Got some more devs tonight, and we're going to talk about influential games. So let me get into the chat. Once again, apologies for the scuffed nature of these, but what are you going to do? I'm a boomer. Hope you enjoy it. Let's chat. Let's join the chat.
But I've had so much other stuff to do that I haven't really pursued it. Sorry.
Are you liking this so far?
Of course.
Of course. That's what you have to say.
Speaking of influential games. No, I'm joking.
How's
okay, cool. Kevin, good to see you. Do you guys want to kick it off, or we don't really have a good opening cadence yet? I don't know. Should I just go, or?
Am I permitted to do a quick introduction of ourselves again, just around the table?
Yeah, okay. We can do that.
Podcasts every time they're like, my name is so and so, and I do this thing.
Yeah, sure. Would you like to start?
Sure. My name is Candace Thomas. I have been in game design for almost 15 years. I've worked at Blizzard on World of Warcraft, Diablo 4. I've moved to Amazon to work on the Lord of the Rings MMO, but I currently work as a principal game designer at Riot Games. Chris?
Yes, I'm a game designer of 13 years, worked at Blizzard on World of Warcraft, designed classes and spells and content and systems and things like that. Right now I'm in between things, but excited for the next big thing, yeah.
My name's Kevin. I'm just under 20-year game developer, and I'm a Twitch streamer now, but I worked on World of Warcraft from very early on. Had the pleasure of working with Chris as well on classes. And from there I went to Cryptozoic Entertainment, or Hex Entertainment, worked on a digital TCG called Hex Shards of Fate, and also worked at Obsidian for a time on a game called Tyranny.
My name is Luca. I am a sound designer. I've been working in games for almost 10 years now. Currently I'm up at a studio called Clay Entertainment in Vancouver, Canada. But before that, I worked at Blizzard for a short while and a couple other studios in the Seattle area for that. So, yeah, let's get into this week. This is a recurring game design podcast, and, I've obviously spent, a ton of time with Chris just hearing about his various influences and games that have inspired him and decisions, he was making on WoW. And we talked shop a whole bunch, but I was just curious to open it up to what sort of games the rest of you take inspiration from, just kind of what have been the real hallmark ones of your career, and what have been, I don't know, ones that have surprisingly left an impact on you, ones that you think about all the time, to ones maybe that have even taught you mistakes not to make. I just going all the way back. I think my first introduction to where the magic of game design could be born from was reading, I think it was this really old video game industry expose called Game Over back in the 90s, and it spent some time talking about the origins of Nintendo. And there's now this really famous anecdote of Shigeru Miyamoto playing hide and seek in the caves kind of around where he was growing up, and down by the rivers, and this lending a lot of inspiration to Zelda. And ever since then, I just find it really interesting to hear about where the ideas people have tend to come from in the industry. I know I'm always listening out, but Chris, you talk all the time about Zelda. Do you feel like there's anything materially there that has really made its way into the sort of things you've worked on at WoW, on WoW?
I think Zelda as an IP and as a game, all of them really have heavily influenced my thinking of games and kind of the experiences that I like to have, and designs that I make or think about. So I mean, I think a lot of it is just it's such a good marriage of exploration and puzzles and setting and the world feeling like it's alive and really Breath of the Wild I think also has been a huge game for me and just kind of I think it's going to be a big game for the industry, influencing a lot of concepts of just open exploration. Anytime I play a game now where I can't like climb up something, when you jump and you just slide off, it's just like a collision. It kind of feels like games I used to play in the past when you jump in the water and you just die. Breath of the Wild has elevated it to like this other degree where it feels like I just have this expectation now. Every game I play, I feel like I should be able to explore and climb anything, And so, I definitely think Breath of the Wild has been a huge thing for me. It's just also video game music and appreciation for that. I think kind of similar to people who really love Final Fantasy, the same sort of reason. So I mean that's a good one, Luca.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that Breath of the Wild really taught me was I think it's like a masterclass in level design, and in the way that video games, as the fidelity of video games and like the graphics and the reality of games is climbing every year, like almost to top each other off. The Unreal Engine will have a more realistic daytime or more realistic water, and we want to emulate the things that we see in the real world: beautiful vistas, craggy hilltops, things like that. It's almost like we have lost touch of what's important for gameplay, whereas Breath of the Wild just embraces it wholeheartedly. There's still beautiful vistas, there's still craggy hilltops, but they incorporate the gameplay of like climbing onto those craggy hilltops, and you don't just do that so that you can get to the quest that you're getting to. Sometimes you want to climb to the top of those hilltops so that you can get a better lay of the land. In general, if you don't know where to go, you just get on a hill and you put a marker in the world, and then you're using your eyeballs and you're keeping your eyes in the world space to navigate around, which was really revolutionary to me, because I feel like games have been backing away from that. And so, there were things that I was picking up about the level design. Most areas are kind of flat, and the angle that you enter is really important. And I'm not a level designer, so probably this is going to sound really fundamental to people who do level design. But the fact that they embrace the gameplay of open world level design over kind of maybe the aesthetic or jaw dropping waterfalls in every shot was really revolutionary to me.
Yeah, and I unfortunately haven't played Breath of the Wild. I feel really sad now. But to speak on that thing that you mentioned, Chris, where you have this expectation, I remember going from my first Assassin's Creed game where it just felt so good to climb around on everything, and you could climb on everything, to another game, Darksiders 2, where your guy was also a great climber, but you could only climb on special areas, the special walls that were specifically marked for climbing. And it just took me right out of it, because it's you look at it and you're like, wait, my guy's an amazing climber. That's part of the story you're trying to tell me, and yet I can't climb this wall, which looks exactly like this other wall, except for these little lines that tell me it's interactable. So it was a huge letdown. So I think games, have to be really careful with the expectations and the sort of the hero that they're selling you. And they have to reinforce that with the gameplay, or it comes across as a huge disappointment.
It's funny because... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, it was funny because this morning I watched a YouTube video that was about, how to fix the problems of Breath of the Wild. And it would have been cool if Kevin played it, because I'm curious. Because I'm always thinking about, they have this one problem in the game, which is just that the weapons break, weapon durability system is something fans complain about.
Right.
It's a contentious thing that a lot of people debate about, and I've still kind of thought about this problem a lot. Like, how would you fix this problem? The video kind of gave the YouTuber gave kind of this suggestion I haven't thought about before, which is basically when the weapon breaks, the player gets like a shard from it, and so the shard can then be used to trade for other weapons or something like that. So it's kind of like it kind of softens the blow of weapon breaking, perhaps. I don't know if I love that solution either, because there's problems with that too. But I thinking about that problem with the weapon durability system is something I'm always thinking about. Really curious what they'll do in the next version.
Can I explain to Kevin? I mean, since he's not played it, when I typically think of weapon durability, I think of a number on some gauge going down, and then I have the option to repair it at some point.
Right.
And I've probably only played a handful of hours of Breath of the Wild, but I don't feel like you repair things; they just snap. Am I crazy? They just break.
Yeah. So
every time you get a fresh weapon, you're kind of like, well, my time with this is going to be limited. Like that really did put me off. So I see why it's so contentious. Like I don't want to lose a thing that I just got, so I'll never use it. It's like saving 99 mega elixirs for the last fight in a JRPG, and then like not needing them at all.
Well, exactly. So I mean, the thinking that Nintendo had, or devs had for Breath of the Wild, really was. I mean, it's a lot of good points, which is just that in games where you have a variety of weapons that you loot around the world, usually the player is compelled to save them for like some rainy time where they'll need that weapon and they don't want to use it, so they just want to use like the basic things, and then they get to the end of the game and they never used any of the cool weapons, and it's kind of a crappy experience, right? And so the game, Nintendo, I think, wanted to tell the player, well, just use it because it's going to break anyways, and it's just kind of like throwing them into it, and I understand that, but the problem really is the player experience when they're mid-battle, the weapon breaks, and now they have to press start, go into the menu, look for a new weapon, equip it, come back to the game. Like, that experience really breaks you out of like the immersion of the game, right? And sometimes when you have a lower tier weapon, it breaks faster on higher level mobs, and so the player may not know that. And their weapon is constantly breaking every 2 hits, right? And it's just kind of, I understand what they're trying to do, and I agree it's a problem. And basically their goals were, they wanted to have a variety of different weapons in the game, dropped around the world, that have different gameplay, could be fun to play, and they didn't want the player to kind of, stockpile them. And they didn't want the player just to choose one weapon, right? Because if you think about Dark Souls, the player usually gets like one weapon they like, or a Monster Hunter, and they made that, right? So they wanted to get that experience out of there, and so I get it. It's just, there's some issues there, right? Yeah,
that's really interesting, because I don't know many single player games that have like pretty aggressive economies. One of the single most influential game of all time for me is Ultima Online, and one of the things that I learned from that game was, and what got me really interested in something I've been fascinated with for forever, is in-game economies. And one of the things that's critical for an economy to actually work, especially when it's massively multiplayer, is that things leave the economy. And you can do that in a variety of ways, but the traditional one is items break, and that's so important, but it's something that players hate generally, and so there's always that struggle between what's good for the economy and the long-term play experience, and everyone's like sort of role, like, am I a crafter, am I a harvester, or am I just a guy who stockpiles gold and buys from those groups? But stuff has to leave the economy, but a lot of games you don't really have to deal with that when they're single player, because they're not as interested in the economy. So it's really interesting that this game went kind of aggressive on the economy in order to create sort of a long-term gameplay goal, like you said, switching weapons, trying different things, not zeroing in on one thing and repeating that until you're really tired of it and don't realize why the game is boring. So it's pretty fascinating.
You hit the nail on the head, though, with the economy aspect of it, because whenever I first encountered that system of like weapons breaking, my designer brain immediately said, "Oh, this is problem solving," because it did seem like the greater good is to break the weapon, and I say that because, like you were saying, the economy even of a single player game is still important to that single player. How often am I getting an upgrade?
Right.
In a traditional Zelda game, you get an upgrade every chapter of the game, and there's 10 chapters of the game, and then that's it. But if you're going to build an enormous world like they did for Breath of the Wild, and you're going to pepper, loot, and you're going to encourage exploration around the game, you have to provide the not just the intrinsic desire to want to see new places, but the extrinsic desire of, I want upgrades, right? And so if you don't break the weapon, then you're going to have a extremely sharp power curve, or maybe even like a linear power curve. You're going to have to keep, and then of course, because it's an open world game, you can't guarantee where anyone's going to be. So to me, it was just problem solving of how can we continually give upgrades to the player and make every chest that you loot feel meaningful and feel like it could potentially have something that you care about. And so, problem solving, just break the weapon.
Yeah. And I like to think of it as like when you first start a game, there's a bunch of faucets, all shooting water out, right? And players, as they sort of master each part of the game, end up turning those faucets off. Like once you collect it's too much gold, you turn off the faucet for gold, that hunger for gold, right? So finding gold and collecting gold is no longer an element of the gameplay. It's no longer exciting and fun to loot gold and collect gold. So best in slot is also another faucet, like for each slot you have, once you find the best thing, you've turned a faucet off, which is, arguably made your game experience worse from a like hunger standpoint of, I want to find the best in slot. And so it's an interesting thing that, like, you guys have already mentioned, you find one weapon and you go all in on that, and it's like now every weapon you find that isn't that is boring and lame to you, right? So rather than you're excited, oh wow, it's sweet, a new weapon, and so trying to maintain that, and that's one of the purposes that breaking the weapon actually serves, as you guys mentioned. And trying to keep the faucets on for as long as possible I think is a noble goal, but players are sometimes at odds with that idea because they don't really understand how their experience is diminishing as they turn each kind of faucet off.
And
go ahead.
Sorry, I feel like I have so much to say on this, not really just from a player economy standpoint, but just as an anecdote. I started playing WoW in 2005, and we're in a room called Theorycraft. This game, soon enough, I kind of divined that the way to play it was to min-max, was to do tons and tons of homework and make these choices and optimize the way you played the game. And that was really the first time I've remembered being so obsessed with optimizing the way that I was playing a game. I don't know if I had done it beforehand or game design was, leveraging it so actively before then, but WoW was really my, I can't not think about min-maxing a game anymore after this moment. So now, and so I don't know how much of the design of single-player games and perk systems and traits and things like that has really kind of come out of the MMO genre and progression systems back into single-player stuff, but it really poisons a lot of my single-player experiences now, and I feel like that weapon breaking and forcing you to cycle around and to, in some situations, kind of have to be suboptimal is like a really bitter pill to swallow when you're just so conditioned to wanting to find, the right, perfect answer to every problem.
Right.
And I think it does make for a much richer experience. But, so over the Christmas break, I went on a tear and played a bunch of Remedy titles. I played Control finally, and then after that, because I was jonesing for more, I went and played Quantum Break, which they released a few years earlier. So if people don't, I think everyone here probably knows Remedy. But yeah, they're over-the-shoulder kind of action games with heavy narrative elements. And so Control had a system where you have these sorts of psychic, telekinetic sort of powers, and you can spend points as you go and make them better. And I started putting points into this launch ability off the bat, and quickly it became basically every single problem in the game looked like a launch-shaped nail, basically, because launch was so good that I had no reason to use any guns or upgrade any of my shit, because you could get launched to a tier where it was solving all your problems. And that was fun because it was I feel like I chose a launch-based playthrough. Really, it was just really imbalanced. And then when I went back to Quantum Break from a few years earlier, they have a skill system in there where, yeah, you can put points into the different abilities you get. Similarly, you have like time manipulation powers here. So you have like a time force field, a dash, all these sorts of things. You can't really go too deeply into any of them, and all the abilities you can fire work on a cooldown system, independent cooldowns versus a shared resource pool in Control. And so in Control, if I dumped 3 launches, I was out of energy, and so all I was going to do was launch because it was the best one. Control, or in Quantum Break, I was using everything because it was like, well, if it's on cooldown, I'm wasting it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that really got me into seeing the bright sides of a lot of abilities that otherwise I probably would not have used. Like if they had gone with a different system there, I would have picked my favorite, and I wouldn't have traded that weapon for the entire game, basically. Instead, I got a really flavorful experience because I wasn't allowed to lean on one crutch too heavily.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was really interesting. It was one of maybe the only design steps, not backwards, but not necessarily for the better from going into Control that I observed.
That's interesting. I wonder how much of that was from player feedback of complaining about the original system. I can't do this and I can't do that.
Yeah.
And here's my experience in Dishonored. If you guys remember the Dishonored games, very good games. You start out and you're running around, you're sneaking around, you kill a guy from behind, you have to hide his body, you have to figure out how to climb up on ledges to get to places you shouldn't be so that you can traverse the world. And then they give you a power to automatically destroy the body when you kill a guy from behind and teleport to the ledges, any ledge you can see, right? And it was like, this is actually making the game worse. I feel more powerful, but I've lost so much of the fun of am I going to have time and where do I hide this body? And now it's just it's weird to think and those are natural steps for progression to take is it makes the things you want to be good at better, but at the same time it's like you were saying, it's narrowing the game and making it less fun and less challenging at the same time by giving me too much power, because it's not like the world scaled where it's well, you can teleport to the low ledge, but you still have to figure out how to get to the high ledge, right? There wasn't any of that. It was just, now I can just zip up to any ledge I want. Game broken, And so I feel like a lot of games struggle with that principle of how much power to give the player before they're actually reducing or diminishing the experience.
I wouldn't even... It can happen so invisibly, too, the ways in which you're ruining your own fun, basically, by just trying to play better. You wouldn't, I wouldn't have known that I didn't want this kind of shared energy system versus cooldowns unless I had immediately gone really and played this game back to back. But it feels also when you mentioned Dishonored, the whole immersive sim genre for me, which is, there's heavy stealth elements in basically all of them now. I feel like this is the worst sort of genre for me because, especially after achievements were added to the world, I never save scummed as hard as I began to save save scum in immersive sims. It was if I didn't finish every single level having been, quote unquote undetected after 500 reloads so that I could get one mission bonus, I could not play it. I would not allow myself to be seen.
Yeah.
And then it's really nice to go into a game where you don't even have these little markings on the wall saying, hey, if you stealth the whole way through, we'll give you a little reward, because then you can start to allow yourself to get seen and just play it out. The playing it out is 100% the fun of the game.
Right.
But when you put this weird thing for me to chase there, I won't do it because I want that title,
That's one of my early complaints to the Metal Gear Solid series is when you're really good at the game is super boring because you never get detected. And the game doesn't react to you in any way. It's you were never there, so did I have any fun? You sort of did because you stealth and you feel good about being the ghost, but the world's not reacting to you in fun ways and then challenging you on the spot, and you have to adapt and figure out how am I going to deal with these new problems, right? Sometimes they force it where you can't ghost through, but anytime they allow for a ghost option, it's really, really try, players, to have a really boring time. It's just a weird message,
It reminds me of two things. One is 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 kind of that Diablo mindset, and this isn't an attack on Diablo. Of course, I made one of the Diablo games, so I'm a huge fan. But players will play in ways that are not fun in order to maximize their fun. And what I mean by that is in a game like Diablo, which is an action RPG, if you've never played it before, for the audience, and it's all gear progression. So you get more powerful items so that you can get more powerful items so that you can get more powerful items. And it's basically, you can just slide that difficulty slider all the way to the most difficult by the time you have progressed. And what feels good about that game is, deciding how quickly you're sliding that slider, and it's a very satisfying gameplay loop. But some people will find very unfun ways to do that, to make that slider jump faster. So an example being, instead of going in and killing the monsters that are made to feel good to kill, they'll go into the hardest difficulty game that they can, session, rift, whatever you want to call it, and then they will avoid all the monsters, run for their lives, and smash all the pots, because the pots will also give loot. By pots I mean like a vase, in a room. And now suddenly the irony is that you're not using any of your player power. The pots have 1 hit point, but you're doing this so that you think that you can slide that slider bar faster, and then if that becomes the optimal way to play the game, you will see that that's what the tutorials on the internet say to do. And so people will actively have no fun. They're like, well, this game is no fun. It's like, well, it's also just the way that you're playing it. And before I let this go, I do that to myself all the time, and I wonder how much of it is because I'm a gamer or like a game developer. And a funnier example is I decided, because I wanted to understand, back in the day when the Kinect was super hot. The Kinect is that thing that you can control the game with your arms. Back in the day, I don't know. Mass Effect 3 had just launched with Kinect capability, and I'm like, what does that even mean in a shooter? Am I gonna point my fingers like a gun and pretend that I'm firing to fire my weapon? And I promised myself before I even launched the game or knew what the Kinect controls were for the game, that if there was an ability to use the Kinect controller, I would only use that for its purpose. And the downside of that is that it wasn't great for some of the situations. For example, and not due to any fault of the game or the Kinect, please don't sue me. It was mostly my own fault. Like, I'd be sitting on the couch, and a thing that you can do with the Kinect is you can use voice control with Mass Effect 3. So you can be shooting at monsters with your hands and using your fingers to do that, but you can say incendiary armor, which is an ability, and then suddenly that will trigger your incendiary armor, which is dope, right? Because now I can shoot and move and trigger my abilities, and I love that. And what I mean by it being my fault is that sometimes my dog would bark at the door, and it would think that I said invulnerability, and it would blow my 10-minute cooldown because it heard my dog barking. Or the same thing happens, the dog moves in front of the camera or something, and so there are things that, or it didn't recognize what I said because I'm in the heat of battle, and I say piercing, no, this armor or something like that, right? It can't know what I just said because I just said nonsense.
Okay, so now the real question, Candace. Since your dog sounds like you, how many times have you sent your dog in place to some meetings over Zoom?
I have put my Fitbit on my dog, and for anyone who ever used a Fitbit, you know why I did that. But what was really cool about it, though, before I finally released the floor to you guys, the other thing was, because a lot of it was voice controlled, another amazing feature that I never knew that I needed that has completely changed the way that, I can never go back if it's an option now, is if you played Mass Effect, actually maybe it was 2, I'm sorry, it was Mass Effect 2, I don't remember, sorry. You know that the dialogue options in a conversation are basically paraphrasing whatever Commander Shepard's going to say, right? So it'll be you'll be in a standoff with a Krogan or something like that, and the dialogue will say drop your weapon, and that's what you select. But really what she'll say is stand aside, everybody, put your weapons down, and that's not how Commander Shepard speaks. But so it'll paraphrase what it says so that you understand what the choice that you're making narratively. But again, because it had Kinect capability, you can read those aloud to select them. And so I got to feel like I was voicing Commander Shepard, even though I was only voicing the abbreviated version of what she was saying.
That does feel really powerful, or sound really powerful.
Yes, it made me feel
That's
like
fucking
a
cool.
badass.
Like, that's just fucking cool. Yeah. That's
So-
not even a gimmick.
Right.
I'm with you. I would do that.
And
Yeah,
whenever
yeah.
I had to make really, really tough calls, like whenever, I'll never forget when I lost Rex. I'm like, I'm going to tear up thinking about it, but I didn't have enough diplomacy to save his life. I had not farmed enough to do it. And he was my favorite character in the entire game. And I had to make the command with my voice, and my voice was shaking. And I had to,
Oh my
love it.
god.
end his life.
I love it.
No, I had to put the controller down and just breathe because I was so immersed in what I was doing. And I'm still to this day, like, I'm cracking up right now because I'm so upset about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's funny about the
Well,
pots.
What? I don't think you said what your influential game is.
Oh, I mean,
That sounds like one of them.
certainly,
Yeah.
certainly that was actually one of my examples. So it was right there in my back pocket. But actually, mine was Bayonetta.
Interesting.
Because I was a hardcore gamer and I was going to prove it, right, by beating Dark Souls, and
Mhm.
and maybe I felt like I had something to prove to the gaming community. Maybe, you
For
know,
sure, yeah.
whatever reason that you feel like you have to do that to say that you've beaten Dark Souls. But Bayonetta, for two reasons. One, because, of course, like the aesthetics of the game, it's just like this whimsical, like sexy game that doesn't really objectify the main character. She is always in control of who she is. It was like a very sex-positive game, which was very...
Mhm.
There wasn't even nuance around that at the time. It was just, how dare you put a woman front and center who's going to have agency over her own sexuality
Right.
and make light of it, you know, without objectifying her, which was really cool.
Mhm.
But then also, the other thing that people were poo-pooing over the game was the I win button. And what I mean by that is, in Bayonetta, it is a combo-based game. So, like you're fighting a fighting game, you say like XXVX, and then she does something.
Mhm.
And the cool part of the game is unlocking more and more combos that are more powerful. And it's very like skill-based. But you can also, if you choose to, you can opt out of that entirely. There's the Y button at the top of your controller that if you just spam that button, it will do the smartest attack for you. People are like, easy mode. Like this was
Right.
before, I think it was BioWare had the audacity to make a game that was like no combat, only narrative. People were like, man, I can't believe it. And I'm thinking, this is terrible. Like, why would I ever not push that button if it's the smartest button to push all the time? And of course, like, there was more nuance to it than that, which was like the witching hour mechanic, which is basically if you perfect dodge, so you dodge at just the right moment, then time slows down, and then and by time slowing down, like the monsters are hitting more slowly, and you can like get behind them, you can do a bunch of pot shots. It basically lets you do a lot of extra damage. And so that Y button that you can just spam outside of witching hour is really powerful, because then once you enter witching hour, maybe you do want to be more efficient and you want to control your own actions,
Mhm.
and the environment is safer to do so because you're not trying to dodge monsters anymore. They're like slowed. But the real lesson that I took away from that is actually that accessibility, the accessibility of that game, even though it was kind of like a weird sex game, if you think about it. She like goes naked for a little while whenever she uses her abilities. You know, people that only had one arm could play that game, and they could feel good about it. People who were not traditionally good at action or fighting games could have a lot of success with that game. And it really opened my eyes to, you know, maybe you don't need cutting edge, you know, white knuckle gripping combat every second of the game.
Mhm.
You can let players decide when they want to check in and start doing something, and then kind of like check out and just like enjoy the ride, you know?
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting question because, you know, it's been one of the questions that's been circulating around Dark Souls is, should they have an easy mode, you know? Is that right for the game, right? So that more people can enjoy it. And, yeah, I mean, the question comes up is, you know, what does that do to Dark Souls' sort of place in our gaming community, right? Because Dark Souls, for a lot of people, is that sort of benchmark, you know, like, are you a gamer? Have you finished Dark Souls, you know? And so, does it damage sort of that part of its, you know, mystique, or its, you know, again, its place in our video game library? And yeah, it's a tough question to answer, because usually, you know, especially the Blizzard Entertainment, you know, school of thought is, hell yeah, make it more accessible, right? And to go back to that Diablo thing, of people like farming pots on the hardest difficulty, sometimes players are doing that because the base game isn't challenging enough. So they're trying to race to a point where the game's going to start challenging them so that they can have fun. So the opposite of, that whole should Dark Souls have an easy mode is a lot of players jump into games and can't find enough challenge to satisfy them until much, much later in the game. And then it starts to feel like, that series that your friend tells you about where it's like, yeah, you got to watch this series. It gets really good by season 3. And you're like, well, I don't want to sit through 2 seasons of garbage so I can get to an eventual good point. And so, yeah, it's a tough problem to solve.
I mean, the problem with that pot situation in Diablo is that Blizzard's production values are such that smashing those pots was just such a satisfying experience
right.
that, like, you weren't even really mad about it because breaking them open sounded so good and looked so cool that they kind of accidentally invented, like, the cookie clicker genre within that farming simulation. I remember, pour one out for the nerfed pots. I remember that on the initial launch, but I would gleefully do that, and maybe it just like says something about my style of game. If you just give me enough dopamine, really good lighting effects, like I'll just sit there and click, man.
I always think of the quote from Bruce Lee: "Boards don't hit back."
Pots don't hit back.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, where's the fun?
That's such a tough question too, because of course, especially if you're going to be the bar for, if that's the identity of your game, which is we want to be really hard, and it's okay that if it's not for you, then it's not for you. That's perfect. Bayonetta actually did, if I may harken back to how amazing of a game Bayonetta is. They also had the third climax, which is the hardest difficulty of the game, does a lot of things. Of course, it's called that. It's the amount of frames that you can get, the window of frames that in an attack that you can enter witching hour is super narrow, which means that your perfect dodge has to be the most perfecter dodge. It makes the game much harder, but also on the hardest difficulty, you're not going to have success if you're mashing the Y button over and over again. So they did kind of control for that. I mean, maybe there's times when you're fighting just 1v1 on a monster, sure, but if you're aggressively, fighting on third climax, the Y button isn't going to get you very far.
That's interesting.
I remember Arkham Asylum, the Batman game, also had some baggage with that. I remember seeing all these YouTube videos making fun of the combat system because you could just mash A, and Batman will just go to near a guy enemy and attack him and jump around him, right? And so kind of the depth of the combat system in some ways is an illusion. If you just sort of just mash buttons, you'll still sort of win. Other than some kind of at the end game, there's certain missions where you can do finesse things with the tools and stuff to really get a higher score. So there is a ceiling there, but I think it's a challenge that the devs have to think about of how hardcore is the combat system going to be, because if it is Dark Souls-esque, you're going to just basically reduce your kind of market size a lot, right? So.
And the weird thing about the Y thing, or just mashing buttons, is the second they change that up on you where it doesn't work anymore, they've set you up for failure, right? Because you've never learned throughout the game how to progress your skills, right? Which most game designers know that mastery of a game and growing into it is one of the most satisfying parts of playing video games, right? Is I'm getting better and I feel that sense of mastery. So they've deprived you of two things. One, they've deprived you of the ending because you can't get through the end because you haven't practiced your skills, and they've also deprived you potentially of that sense of mastery. But yeah, it does allow people that otherwise wouldn't be able to play games, which is definitely of value. And like you were saying, Candace, with the BioWare game that just did the story mode, that kind of branched into, well, what if we just do games that are pure story? You know, then the whole Telltale thing started, right? And what's funny about the Telltale experience is like you kind of resent the moments where they want you to press X really fast to like get through the scene, right? Like it actually interrupts the fun of the game, which is making really fun narrative choices. At least that was my experience. But yeah, it's it is really, it's really important, I guess, at the end of all this is to figure out what it is you're trying to make and make sure you stick to that plan throughout. You know, if you want to be the Dark Souls thing where it's going to be challenging and difficult and you're going to have to grow, and they've done an amazing job with the pacing of, okay, you figured out how to kill one skeleton, now it's time to face two, and you're just like, oh god, right? Back to the drawing board, got to learn this fight now. And you know, the pacing in that game is so excellent versus like a game where it's largely more for fun and entertainment, and you can press Y to get through a lot of the challenges.
I wonder. Oh, I was just saying. I feel like there's got to be someone out there could write like a master's thesis on how much of the rise of the achievement system and social media and people being online all the time and how performative things are and like self-exposure, personal brands goes along with this sort of need to tie performance and worth and all of these things to difficulty in games and gatekeeping things from other people. Like, I just feel like it's that conversation has gotten tighter and tighter over the years, and I don't want to say, oh, back in my day, you know, people just played games because they were fun, but at the same time, like, I do feel like, you know, I personally feel like I walked a path of not really thinking too much about, you know, my performance in games, and then I hit the kind of WoW era and then into my like rhythm game heyday, where I would get really, really obsessive about feeling like, hey, my brand is I'm technically skilled at this game, and you know, nerfing games down would be an affront to me, because then how else am I going to let people know that like I'm really good at stuff? And now, you know, you come through to the other side. Probably for a lot of people, it's as they get older or have children or start to realize that, you know, their time on Earth is limited. They just start feeling like, look, I'm just going to turn the difficulty down. Like, no one's watching me, you know, bash my head against this story boss that's had its HP multiplied by a factor of 10. You know, no one's going to care. Like, tree falls in the woods. Like, I can just turn the difficulty. I did this in Dragon Age 2. I was playing it on Nightmare mode because, as you said, I was seeking that challenge off the bat. I wanted to feel mechanically engaged. It wasn't for bragging rights, but it was just like, I'm going to fall asleep if I don't do this. But then there were a couple of points where it was like just brutally overtuned. And I had to stop for a second, because I'm like, if I turn the difficulty down, I might lose out on an achievement that says I played through a nightmare the entire way through.
Right.
And then I ultimately realized, after trying this end of act sort of raid boss in the game for, you know, an hour, where I was like, I know that I can do this, but it's technical execution of the same pattern for half an hour in a row with no mistakes. And I'm like, I just can't do this. Like, and so that, you know, that changed for me. But I find that sentiment really interesting.
Yeah.
Of course, the conversation's combative, because all online conversation is now. But
one of the things I remember, or try to realize, is that we also tend to think that the entire community is one community. You know, all of gamers are one way, you know, because what we get on Twitch a lot is everybody does this, and this is the way that everyone plays now, you know, and they conveniently forget about like how 80% or more of gamers have never even heard of Twitch, right? They just play games, you know, like, and yeah, that number has shrunk, the number of people, you know, that don't know about Twitch, but I still don't think it's like overwhelming, you know. And so there are a lot of people that just buy games and then play them, and that's it. And they don't share the experience with everyone online, or go to Reddit or YouTube to watch videos about speed runs, and you know, they're not glued to Twitch streamers that are playing the game in crazy ways, you know. Like, there's just a lot of people that just play games, but the perception is always everybody does this. We can't make games that for those, you know, that the old style of player anymore, or whatever it is. But yeah, such a fallacy.
The silent majority.
I just want to add to, like, if anybody else in the room wants to come up, just raise your hand, and I think Luca can bring you up if you want to add your own thoughts too. But I think we're going to have a hard stop at 7, I think, right, Candace?
I certainly actually, I mean, if y'all want to continue the conversation, you're certainly allowed.
Yeah, I have a hard stop to at 7, so.
Okay.
But, yeah, I think with this, too, I think the other interesting thing is, like, Sekiro, I think, did a good job also with, like, they have, like, another mode where you can play where the combat system adds another layer of depth where you just can't hold the button to just auto parry, or auto dodge, I mean. And I thought that was an interesting way to do it as well. Like, so it's kind of like an opt-in sort of difficulty there. And so I kind of wonder if like Dark Souls and Elden Ring will kind of go that route.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I love the combat style. I love those really interesting choices of, yeah, I can set myself to always be ready to block, but if I do it in a more timely fashion, then I get rewarded with, more stamina availability because I'm regenning when I'm not blocking and that kind of thing. So there's a scaling performance reward there for different, levels of players.
Lucas?
Do y'all feel like the... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you had mentioned something that I wanted to underline because it's kind of important to me for no reason, but you had mentioned that you play through just in case there's an achievement that you've spoiled, like by, getting to the last boss, and then you put your difficulty down, and then suddenly you feel like you just got robbed of something, even though you did like 95% of the work, 99% of the work. I just want to say, like, I see the value in that achievement. Also, fuck you entirely for making them. Like, whoever you are, like, I want to know why you do it.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about why you do it. Just like that same person. The same person who decided the first time that you were going to lose to win a boss fight, and then every time you're like, this boss fight's really hard. I wonder if I'm supposed to lose for like 5 years of your life. That person too. I want to have chats with you.
Yeah.
So
that's funny because
those two people are special people in the history of
I feel like I've argued my whole career about how important good achievement design is, and how I think underappreciative people are when they're designing achievements of the impact it has on players' mentality.
True. 100%.
And achievements were kind of forced on us, because there was a time, I think, when Steam required a set of achievements for games to be on Steam. So a lot of games that wouldn't even do achievements were like, okay, well, here's 10 achievements, so we can get on your storefront, And so many of them were like really, really bad gameplay achievements, like do this thing 1,000,000 times, right? But there's just so many people that are completionists. I'm one of them, it's just like, well, I got to get that achievement, but I drive myself into the ground. I grind my brain into dust, and, to collect this thing. And it's a horrible experience. So like designing achievements really well is both really challenging and super important. And I think our games are still like just throwing achievements at us as filler. And they're creating so many really terrible play patterns in a lot of players' minds. It's really dangerous stuff.
I imagine the achievement design gets done pretty late in the process.
Yeah, that's the other thing too.
Generally.
Yeah, I remember my most painful achievement was dodging the lightning 200 times in a row.
Yeah, for Yuna, sorry, for Lulu's thing.
Oh
my god.
But that said, I've never felt better than when I got that. I was like, I put in the dedication. Like,
yeah, because the pain and suffering was over. You felt great because the pain and suffering was over.
When he got that, we were all playing together in a basement in high school. He was grinding the 200 lightning bolt dodges out.
Right.
He was losing his mind.
It's a classic example of negative reinforcement. You feel super good when you plug in your seatbelt because that annoying buzzing stops, right? It's like, woo, we did it. No more buzzing. Thank God I can drive now in peace. But yeah, terrible achievement. Even though you feel good at the end, I really question the why you feel so good.
I wonder if you could do a whole Clubhouse room on just your most memorable achievement. I'm sure it's terrible.
Yeah.
Everyone's got stories, I bet.
Achievements I'd love to hear about are like, you know, the 3 naked guys that killed Onyxia. You know, like, that's super cool to me. The game didn't push them to do that, you know. They just went and did it because they thought it'd be fun.
Okay, play through Mass Effect, but only ever read your conversational choices.
Now, do I have my dog next to me, or?
Yes.
Okay. I gotta get a dog, and then a particular breed, is it better for... I gotta min-max the breed.
A dog who's ordering treats for herself off your Alexa.
That's right.
Mysteriously.
Yeah. You know, Lewis, Candace, he would like rent video games, and he would only rent the ones that the achievements were easiest to get based on like what the points were for Xbox, and just like play through it, not have any fun, but just try to get as many points as he could in a short amount of time.
That's
and
amazing.
I'm like, why? You know, this is for that score. It's like, this is like the
Gotta
game
get my
designer
points up.
dark patterns here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to be really careful. And it's so funny because I get kind of control-y sometimes because I try to protect players from themselves as much as I can. But you know, the players obviously will come back at you and be like, well, you're not the boss of me, you know, like, let me have whatever fun I want, you know. But I try to protect them from doing the things.
Example of this behavior of people solving the problem for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
In the rhythm game sphere, I would encounter this a lot with Rock Band, where, you know, you're scored on vocals based on your pitch accuracy. So eventually the top players were doing nothing but just singing like and like not actually trying to even mouth any words, but basically just hum up close to the microphone, and it sounded nothing like music. It was a super degenerate play pattern for trying to get someone in, but just racking up the stars on some Queen song, and like nobody wants to listen to you, but you're scoring. It's like,
right.
That's what they did.
Yeah. So sounds like it needs a redesign.
I mean, it probably did wake enough people up to the idea of playing music that it was still a big net win, but I was kind of surprised to see, because that community was notoriously score obsessed, talking about achievement racking up. I mean, Score Hero and the Guitar Hero era was really big for, I think, foregrounding insane game difficulty up there, because YouTube was just coming out at the same time too. So, yep, a lot of Hummers.
Nice. That sounds like a different game.
On that note.
Not sure if Call of Duty or Second Life. Anyway.
Right.
One of my favorite examples of that is the people who made the rule that they would not pick their faction in World of Warcraft, which was, for those who have not played, there's a race called Pandaren, which could choose their faction after a quest line. So they would hear the compelling story to join the Horde, and then they would also hear the compelling story to join the Alliance. And it was this moment that you felt like you had control over, which was really cool. But also, because players had control over it, there was a way to... You couldn't bypass the decision. Like, you just couldn't progress in the game anymore. You get to the point, it's like, join the Alliance, join the Horde, don't get any more quests. And don't, leave this island. And so, A, they solved the problem. Like, yes, we know how to leave the island. We're going to do that. And B, yeah, we can't get any more quests in the game, but you still get experience for, like, looting herbs or something. Like, I don't even think you could get experience killing monsters anymore. I think it was just picking herbs and mining that you could do to get XP. And then so it became this super, like, it was a prestige moment to get to max level. Even though, like, prestigious, like, all you did was fucking mine and herb.
Right.
But because you were, like, neutral to everyone, because you hadn't selected a faction, you were, like, the Pandaren god of the game. And I don't even remember, did they ever fix
Oh,
that?
yeah, they've memorialized.
Like, if you want to be an edgelord, this is who you are.
And how much of that comes from, like, the terror of making the wrong choice,
You mean the reason I'm not playing Shadowlands right now? Because that is exactly what drove me to, like, kind of... It just felt like, even though I knew that the choices, for example, of picking Covenants was not impactful enough to, like, make a huge impact on my raw numbers output, like, I was so racked with the flip-floppy choice of sticking with one aesthetic to another, and I was thinking about it. This is more of a me thing than a Shadowlands thing, 100%.
Right.
But like, I just day after day logging in, knowing already the renown I would have to make up and how consequential it would be to flip back. Like, I was sort of just like, I had this subroutine running for my first 2 weeks of playing the game, and eventually it just became exhausting. And I think it was a thing that led me to be like, I'm okay not hopping on, and then not hopping on for a few days means not hopping on at all.
Right.
And I only mention this not to like throw shade on Shadowlands. There are plenty of places for people to do that. I more because I was surprised that even such a simple choice paralysis that had been, the edges had been sanded off so hard was still enough to make me pause.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't really expect it, but there it was.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing you have to work on. But yeah, the solution is rarely remove all choice from games, right? So that the small population among us, that can't handle choice, right, are satisfied.
Really, you guys don't just abort anytime there's analysis paralysis situation. You don't just quit the thing entirely.
Control Alt Delete, go back to bed. And
You should see how quickly I walk out of a cold stone whenever I see that menu. I think I want something. There's that many options. I just crumble. I can't do it.
Oh no.
Sometimes you just want the omakase, though. You just want them to hold your hand and tell you what's great, and
go in with a blindfold and just dealer's choice.
I think eventually you just become desensitized to it. Just like, well, there are all these choices that are supposed to be hard, but I understand that the game's probably balanced for you choosing any of them. And if it's not, then it's like something's wrong here. So, I think really the player kind of always kind of thinks the choice is a lot more harder than it really is.
Yeah. And it's something I've grown past.
Something, of course, you have to be mindful for.
20 years ago, I was exactly that kind of gamer. Saved every pop potion for the last fight that I would never end up using, and never making a choice until the last second. But yeah, I've gotten past those hurdles by just getting my toes wet, jumping in and realizing, hey, the water's fine, right? So
Yeah,
I think it varies from game to game. Just making it okay to fail,
Yeah.
That's learned trauma. Like, you'd had the one time when you didn't save all the broomsticks to get to the broomstick dungeon or whatever, and you're like, well, now I can't progress.
Right.
And I wonder if, like, the next generation of gamers doesn't have that kind of trauma, where they feel more emboldened to make, their own decisions, as opposed to, like, how can I intuit what the game designers want me to do at the max level,
Yeah. They also, they feel more in touch with the devs, so they feel like their voices can push the design, so they're much louder, right? Because it's proved effective. If I just complain about this, if I +1 these complaints enough, then they'll shift gears and I'll be happy, even though all they've really done is potentially diminish the experience.
Like, I wonder what the patient zero game is for anyone who has ever tried to beat a boss and it was really, really hard, and they said to themselves, I wonder if I'm supposed to lose. Right. And I wonder where that falls off. Like, what game do we all have in common that did that to us?
Yeah. I mean, Dark Souls 1, I think, has that boss that you auto lose to the first time, right?
Yes, it does.
The dragon or whatever that you can't beat.
You
just get screwed out of your souls, and
if you shoot his tail a bunch, you can actually get a really good sword.
There's a boss in the first Dragon Age that's that way too.
No, not that dragon, but there's one where you climb up a giant ring tower, circular tower set of stairs, and then you get to the top and you die because he's like across a platform, like you can't even get to melee him, and so it's all about seethe, I think someone in my chat is saying, but so it's about min-maxing your loss prevention, right? Like how little you're losing. Spend all your souls before you do this fight, and make sure you have one of those items equipped that preserves things and all that. Because there's no way to actually beat that fight the first time. But pretty interesting.
I think we really handedly wrapped all the way around from talking about weapons breaking in Zelda to sort of like making it the design of making a player feel like it's okay to fail, and the learned trauma and addressing all these sorts of things. It's like a real persistent and tricky lesson in that space. I wonder if there are some games too that have been especially good at taking a player and kind of growing them from one type into another.
Right,
you know, like comfortably all along the way, as opposed to just sort of like forking the path at the beginning and saying story lovers go here, tryhards go here, you know.
Yeah, interesting. And then games that fold dying or failure into the actual experience. What's the game that did that? The old school RPG, CRPG.
Rogue.
No, when you die, it like takes you back to a different story area where you proceed from there, and it explains how you're actually immortal and whatnot. And like, it doesn't just flavorize death; it actually makes dying part of the experience.
Oh, Hades?
No, it wasn't Hades. Hades does a great job though of that too. Like, it's really old school. Like, can't remember.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Tides of Numenera was the remake or the sequel to it, but I'm drawing a blank on the name. Planescape Torment. Yeah, my chat's got it. Planescape Torment.
Wait, what was it called?
Planescape Torment.
Planescape Torment. Okay, I'll have to look.
Man, that's like one of the greatest games I've never played.
Right.
Like, everybody who's played that game is just pivotal, right?
Yeah, you're a bad person.
It's hallowed, but at this point, I don't think I'm going to get back there.
Right.
I am aware of its reputation, so that's something, but...
Yeah, they did a great job.
Those games, some of them, like, you know, that you're talking about that you're just like, you just can't bring yourself to play them. I just take a trip through YouTube and just breeze through the play and interpret, like, how some things worked and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm still holding out on watching all Metal Gear 4 cutscenes.
Nice.
One day it'll happen.
Nice.
I don't want to spoil myself, you know?
The title of this chat could have been like, what are your most influential games, and also who hurt you?
That's right.
Yeah.
Who were you mad at?
Okay, we have to have Candace in the titles. Actually, Candace is really good at titles and names and things like that.
It's been
canonized.
Y'all gotta go?
Well, I just want to be mindful of the time and everything.
Yeah.
But,
It's been a blast,
guys.
guys.
Good. This is fun. Always fun time talking to some of my favorite people here. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, as always, thanks for having me. I can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
See you next
time.
time.
Take care of yourselves.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Later, gamers.
All right, thanks for watching. That was Clubhouse chat number 2. Yeah, that was with Chris Kaleiki, Candace Thomas, and Luca Fusi. All 3 are alums from Blizzard, and some very high-level thinkers who've been in the industry for a long time. Just sharing our love for games and the ones that influenced us this time. So I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to gently back rub that like button if you enjoyed it. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.